Everybody, my name is John DePietro, and I want to thank you so much for taking time from your busy day to be with us for this discussion. I don't want to call it a debate, but folks, let's face it, unless you've been under a rock for the last few years, you know we're in the midst of the most contentious presidential election cycle that I've ever seen, and I just hit 7 years old, so figure out how many times we've had an opportunity to vote. And again, I spent many, many years in the news media and have found that today's news media is not news media anymore, but is opinion media disguised as news. So people that are on one side of the political spectrum, let's just say you're on the left, you look at Fox and you say, oh, it's just a mouthpiece for Trump. And last election cycle, if you were for Trump, you looked at CNN or NBC or MSNBC or whatever and said that's just a mouthpiece for Clinton. So I think it's gotten worse in this cycle, and the first two debates, the presidential debate and the vice presidential debate, one didn't get better than the other, and all people are saying is you're not hearing anything factual, you're hearing opinion. So what I said is, let's get on Facebook and let's find some real live people, not people that are disguised as undecided voters. I mean, both of the guests that we have today are definitely decided. And my guess is that we're not going to change either one's mind as to what goes on in who they're going to vote for in the next few weeks. So with that being said, let me introduce our guests today. Okay, and this is when they ring the bell when Michael Buffer comes out and says this, that, or the other thing. So representing should I flip a coin on this as to who I talk to first? But the guy in the middle down below, at least on my camera, his name is Doug Lambert, and Doug comes from New Hampshire. Doug, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a small business owner. I'm a family guy. I'm married with children. I've been very involved with politics pretty much since I turned 18, cast my first vote for Ronald Reagan, and just really always been a news junkie. It started when I was a little kid. I was a weather junkie, but I just follow things along, and just very concerned about politics, and I understand that while it may seem national, it does affect us at every level. It affects my business, affects my family, affects my religious activities. It has its tentacles into everything. Okay. It really has gotten worse as I've gotten older. It didn't seem to be this way when I was younger.
Great. And also with us this afternoon from Cape Cod, formerly from Central Massachusetts, is Tim Ethier. Tim is a former teacher. Tim, tell us about your background and your political background, and then I want to ask you guys some questions.
Thank you, John, and it's nice to see Doug. I was a high school teacher at Wachusett Regional for 32 years. I taught history, political science. I'd like to point out, too, I've been retired now for 10 years, and I often share my political opinions, but as a teacher, I like to feel I was even-handed. As a teacher, I was the advisor of both the young Republicans and the young Democrats at the school, so I arranged debates and so forth. But I do have my opinions, and in my opinion, Joe Biden is a far superior candidate to Donald Trump for the election coming up in a couple of weeks. I grew up in Spencer, moved to Holden at a fairly young age, where I spent most of my career and now spend most of my time on Cape Cod. While in Holden, I served on the Holden Select Board for 4 terms, off and on, 12 years total. I also spent a couple of years in the school committee. I always felt that if you have an opinion, you should essentially step up to the plate and participate. And I always had plenty of opinions, both nationally and locally, and I wasn't afraid to express them. So I'm retired now. I'm enjoying life, but I am concerned about this upcoming election. I think it is a very, very important election. And I think for the sake of the United States, and really the sake of the free world, we need to replace Donald Trump.
Okay. So with that being said, I asked both candidates, right? Isn't that so funny? I asked both gentlemen to submit some questions that actually I'll read their questions and they can both respond to it. And we'll do it that way there. I don't want to get there that I have to have a timekeeper and somebody's going to be ringing a bell and blah, 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 blah. None of that stuff, because you know what? None of it works. But the good part about it is I have the mouse in my hand, and I can kind of control it that way a little bit better than they control it on TV. So first question, let's see. I don't even know who sent this one in. Oh, Doug. Doug supplied this question, I guess. So Tim, you can answer it first, and then Doug respond to either his answer or your answer as well. Why is the Hunter Biden story important or relevant to this election? And that's the question. So Tim, why is the Hunter Biden story? Go ahead.
It's important because I think it once again focuses attention on Donald Trump and his campaign strategy. As with last time, he toward the end dug up all kinds of dirt on Hillary Clinton. A lot of it wasn't even true, and it helped him win the election. I think he's doing the same thing about Biden. In fact, I feel very confident he is. It's out of desperation. Everything I've read about this, some fellow in New York, I guess it was, found the computer a few years old that all of a sudden he claimed to find was from Hunter Biden. I'm not sure if that's true or not. Copied the hard drive, passed it on to Rudy Giuliani, who then, he won't deny it, passed it on to the Russians for what everyone says, and they then sent it back to him. And now the papers published a story that seems to indicate that there is some type of terrible wrongdoing. And I'll try to be quick, but the computer went through Russia. It's so easy to manipulate the hard drive. Who knows on that computer what was actually a legitimate message, if it was in fact Hunter Biden's computer, or something Russian operatives put on there in an effort to help Donald Trump, as they did in 2016. They can easily, essentially create videos, they can Photoshop pictures of whoever with whoever. It's done all the time. So they had that computer. They have the best minds in the world working on it. And then they send it back. And 2 weeks before the election, it's made public by Rudy Giuliani, of all people. I think it's a joke. It's a last-minute effort to smear the Bidens. I think it's outrageous.
Okay. So Doug, respond to your own question or respond to Tim's response to your question.
Well, first of all, I think that Tim has added a few little extra nuances there. Nobody that's reporting on this story has said that the laptop went from the shop to the Russians. Also, nobody...
That's late breaking news. Tim had a special on that because he's at the Cape and he saw the plane flying over.
Oh, okay.
From Otis, right, too.
You know, the fact of the matter is nobody has, especially the Bidens, have not addressed the computer itself and said that it's not true, or they've denied the information that's on there. And with each passing hour, more and more reputable sources are verifying the authenticity of the computer and the hard drive. But beyond the specifics of that, the reason I put the question and wondered why it's important is I think that it's illustrative of several things that affect us in politics today. First of all, I think it's a really good example of the corruption that exists within the United States government. There are people that are more than willing to sell us out to our enemies and to other foreign actors for money. This whole business of Hunter Biden sitting on an energy company board in the Ukraine. I mean, honestly, and Tim, what is Hunter Biden's qualification other than the fact that he was the vice president's son? I mean, the guy literally has zero. I'm in the energy business. I have customers that are related to the energy business. I'll bet that pound for pound, I'm much more qualified to sit on the board of some energy company than Hunter Biden. So you have a person related to the government willing to trade on that relationship for money. Okay, and it's just the latest example. You guys are both old enough to remember the Clintons in the 90s, and you remember the whole Laurel missile and Johnny Chung and that whole business where Some very high-end missile technology got sold to the Chinese. Again, for money. It was basically a forerunner of the Clinton Foundation and the pay for play that we see. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you it doesn't happen with Republicans too, because I'll bet that there's plenty of ex-congressmen and senators that have traded. I mean, they call them lobbyists, and they're certainly using their connections and expertise to earn a living.
Okay. So with that being said, Tim, any, I hate to use that word rebuttal, but you know,
Well,
the way
nothing
this will work is,
much
I'll give the question, you give the answer, the other person gives the answer, then you can get the final word on it. Go ahead.
I hate to have this discussion, just as the debates between Trump and Biden focus on their children. I think it's very unfair. The young Hunter Biden has been talked about at length. Biden has a nice family. He stood up for his son, who he loves. The Trump family, how Donald Trump can claim that Biden's family members are profiting off the government, or his family member did, and not acknowledge that he's got basically his 3 children working for his administration, making big money. His daughter and her husband, who is his top advisor, are investing money all over the world. They supposedly have made, and I think it's pretty much factually based, $160 million in profits over the last few years. That's Jared Kushner and his wife, over investments in foreign countries. So if anyone has taken advantage of the position, I would say it's Trump. But I don't want to spend the whole time on here just talking about their kids. Talk about the candidates themselves.
So Tim's question to Doug was, we'll go back to that. We'll go back to that later. Tim's question to Doug: why should the American people be concerned over Trump having 400 million and perhaps as much as $1 billion in debts due over the next 4 years?
So the difference between Trump and Biden, or people like Biden, is that Donald Trump made his money through the years leading up to his getting elected as president. Prior to that, he never held elective office, and he made money. The serious question is, how does a guy like Joe Biden, who has only been a politician for 47 years, become so wealthy? Doing what? Other than a senator's salary? I mean, I didn't look this up. What does a senator make? I believe it's less than $200,000 a year. Am I wrong, Tim? Do you know what a senator makes?
It's about 180,000, I think. Maybe John knows exactly, but something.
So Biden has 3 houses. I mean, his family has become wealthy. Again, I could go back to the first question, and we all know that it's pretty obvious that the father, has taken a cut of Hunter's pay. So
That's alleged.
Trump has debt.
If
you read the art of the deal, what's that?
That's alleged.
That came from the Russian supply computer. Right?
Oh, come on.
Again, I'm not.
Giuliani didn't deny it. He didn't deny it.
I will. I'll get in on this when I have to, but I don't want it to be 2 people against 1 or 1 against 2 like it was in the other stuff. So I'll try to be as partial as possible. Anything more on that answer to that question, or can I go to Tim and let him?
Well, the only thing as far as debt, I mean, anybody that's followed Donald Trump's business history, okay, knows I mean, he borrows money, he makes investments, he builds things. I mean, we all do it. Anybody that's in business might have a line of credit, and so on and so forth. So I don't think that it's any big surprise or scandal that he has debt. He has a very widespread business. It has a lot of real estate holdings, and it's very normal for people in his business to work with borrowing and financing through banks. I see nothing wrong with it. As far as his kids go, again, you know, the money that they earn doing the jobs that they're doing for the government, I would contend is very open and certainly available for scrutiny.
Okay. So Tim, on that aspect of your own question, why should people be concerned over Trump having over 400 million and perhaps as much as $1 billion in debts due over the next 4 years? Go ahead.
the American people not be concerned? If there was ever a president in our country's history who should have released his tax returns and his business dealings prior to taking over the office, it is this person. He has money all over the world, or at least he has buildings all over the world, investments all over the world. How do we know as a people what his reasoning is in making decisions? And many of the decisions he's made, you can question them. He has almost, or at least he's acknowledged, over $400 million in debt, possibly $1 billion. The debts are coming due. It's not American debt. American banks wouldn't even loan Trump money at one point. He can get loans from foreign countries because they expect something in return, which is just what he's given them, and what he might very well have to give them in the future. Who's going to refinance that debt? I don't know if Trump claims to be a billionaire. Is he a billionaire? Who knows? He won't release his records. Why doesn't he release his tax returns?
Okay.
He denied the New York Times tax returns were accurate, but then why won't he show his own? I'm nervous about Trump and the leverage that other countries he's borrowed money from have over him, Russian oligarchs and possibly Chinese as well.
Yeah. Doug, you got the question, Doug, right? Okay, so you get a short time to respond to what he just said regarding what you said.
You know, again, one of the problems here is we're basically saying or making it out that a person outside of politics can never be a president because all his business dealings and that somehow are cause for people like Tim to think there's got to be something to it, where it can't just be that the guy loves his country and he was concerned and felt he had a role that he could play. But as far as blackmail and that, again, I think that the Hunter Biden laptop, the reason it went to the FBI a year ago and they didn't do anything with it is because there are deep state actors within our own country that are willing to use these things for blackmail to get an elected person like a Joe Biden to do the things that they want him to do. And talk about potential for blackmail, I mean, the Chinese, the Russians, yeah, from what I understand that's on that laptop, there's plenty of material in addition to what's already come out public that could be used for future blackmail purposes.
Okay, so that was Tim's question, right? To Doug?
Yes, that was nice.
Okay, so I'll here, let's go to the economy here. Doug writes, what's the best course to follow in order to build up and grow the economy? What's the Biden approach and what's the Trump approach? Tim, that's directed to you.
All right, first off, as we all know, we're in the middle of a national crisis. The COVID-19 virus continues to spread. People continue to die. We have to get that under control. And leadership on things like this start at the top. Trump's leadership on COVID-19 has been pathetic from the beginning. He knew in February 7th was the date he actually talked to Bob Woodward in his interviews, and he revealed that he knew the virus was extremely dangerous. He didn't tell the American people. If we had a better leader in there, as far as I'm concerned, the economy would not be trashed as it is now. Unemployment is double what it was when Trump took office. The deficits have exploded. What would I actually do, or what should Biden do? First of all, he has to get COVID under control, and I think he has a lot better skills at that than Trump. All right. Secondly, we have to get the deficit under control. Prior to COVID, deficits were already over $1 trillion this year. When Trump took over, the deficit was under $600 billion. He nearly doubled it. Most of that came from his huge tax cuts for the rich, for himself, and for many others. So what do we need to do? We have to get deficits under control. We can't run a country. This year, now it's over $3 trillion. Now, I realize a couple trillion of that is one-time money that's been used as a stimulus to help people in need, and I support that. But we've got to get the deficit back down before we can do anything with the economy. And people have to start paying their fair share of taxes. Trump pays nothing. He's a billionaire. Supposedly he pays no federal income taxes. I paid over $8,000 last year as a retired teacher. Trump, the last time he paid taxes, he paid $750 and zero many years before that. We have to cut the loopholes that allow people like Trump, companies like Amazon, the biggest companies in the world, making huge profits off the United States, don't pay a nickel into our system, which is destroying our economy. We have to face it or force them to pay their fair share. That'll get the economy going. We got to get deficits down. That'll help there. We got to get COVID under control. And those are the three things I think are most important.
Great, perfect. Doug, respond to your own question.
Right. So Tim talks about the fact that Trump did nothing and provided no leadership back in February. I would remind him that Trump put the inbound transportation lockdown against China, where at the time, and then it followed with other countries to keep a slowdown of the spread. Well, his people, his buddies like Pelosi and the people in New York City were telling people to go to Chinatown and to go and celebrate their things. And there was no need to not get out and do some of the things that they were used to doing. There were a lot of unknowns. I will grant that in the beginning. Now, he referred to the Woodward interview where Trump said that, he didn't he wanted to downplay it. I don't know to what benefit this country would have found if we would have created a mass state of panic. I just think that keeping people seriously informed and engaged and concerned, but not getting everybody in widespread panic was the right thing to do. I mean, we saw the so-called toilet paper shortage. Imagine if that panic had been exponentially increased and spread out to food and everything else. I think it would have been a bad thing. So he says that Biden, his plan will first of all get COVID under control. Biden's plan will involve widespread lockdowns. Now, I would contend that the reason the economy is still in the state that it's in are because of states that are run by Democrats. Democrats that are locking things down, that are preventing children from going to school. I live here in New Hampshire, and while I've got my disagreements with Governor Sununu on some things, he has threaded the needle, and I think that he's walked a very fine line, and he's balanced the concern in approach to the virus while still maintaining the economy and allowing people to work.
Okay.
And I think that's certainly the approach that's needed to go forward. And these Democrat governors, I'm thinking like Whitmer in Michigan, and certainly Cuomo in New York, and now Gavin Newsom in California, keeping Disney closed.
I got to stop on that time-wise, okay? I want to be fair with everybody here. Tim, I think you got, if I'm doing this right, I think you got about 30 seconds to, that was your question, right, Tim?
Quick response.
No, it was Doug's question.
That was Doug's question.
Okay.
Quick response. As far as cities go, and he mentioned the Democratic states being the ones that are having the biggest problems. If Trump had let on early on what he knew about the virus, that he knew COVID was, very much lethal. That was it could be spread by the air. He kept that to himself. Now, supposedly he didn't want to induce panic. I've seen the analogy. It's like the Titanic hit the iceberg, but they couldn't tell the people. They didn't want them to panic. If he had told the mayor of New York City, the mayor of Boston early on, they could have shut down the airports earlier. It was 2 weeks after he found out how serious the virus was before he shut down travel to China. And almost every other country in the world had at that time. People could still travel from places everywhere. The virus actually came in from Europe. It didn't come in from China. They can trace it to where it came into Boston. It came into New York City. That's what areas were particularly hard hit. Because
I think it was. Well, let's just blame Yankee fans for bringing it in because it went to New York first. Okay, we can all agree on that. Now, yeah. I got a question from Tim to Doug, and that question is: Trump promised to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. Why hasn't he presented a replacement plan after nearly 4 years in office? Doug,
all right. Well, so the first answer to this is Paul Ryan and John McCain and people like that early on in Trump's administration. Okay, I think that certainly I am willing to point the finger at congressional Republicans who had some power at the time at the beginning, and they could have certainly implemented something and they didn't. And now, of course, the Democrats have taken over. And I mean, we look at Congress and they're basically a broken branch of government. I mean, between the two sides, they really can't manage to do anything. and for them to sit down and hammer out a cohesive healthcare plan is really, until the Republicans can gain back control of the House, it isn't going to happen. And if they do it with rhinos like Paul Ryan, it's not going to get fixed. But Trump has done a lot during his term through executive action. He certainly, they've repealed the individual mandate, which was very, it was onerous on individual people. I mean, I've got a whole list of things. I didn't memorize them because it's not a test, but I have a paper. I mean, he's done lots for, it's certainly been in the news that people that need insulin have found it more affordable. He's expanded association health plans. He's expanded access to, so that there's more than one provider in the many states. I mean, there's a whole variety of things that you can look up. Certainly one of the other things is he allowed easier access to experimental drugs, which anybody with a deadly disease is more than willing to try. I mean, it's a mess. Nobody disagrees. I'm a small business owner. I deal with health insurance with my employees all the time.
Gotta stop you, Doug, just to keep the timing, because we only got about 7.5 minutes left on the whole thing, to keep it in a short time period. Tim, you want to respond to that? Your question.
I guess my response would be that for nearly 4 years, Trump has been claiming he's going to come up with some kind of a healthcare plan to replace Obamacare. He hasn't come up with anything. He hasn't proposed anything. You can blame the Congress, but it comes from the top. President Obama came up with the Affordable Care Act. It wasn't called Obamacare, and he still would prefer it be called what it was meant to be called, the Affordable Care Act. If Trump, in fact, succeeds in what he wants to do, which is to completely repeal Obamacare, over 20 million Americans will lose their health insurance. That's over 20 million people. People with pre-existing conditions won't be protected anymore. That would be catastrophic for people. And that's what Trump's been trying to do without any replacement at all. The trouble with the individual mandate, when people were mandated to have insurance, it meant that people weren't showing up at the emergency room looking for regular services. You had to have insurance, which makes sense. People should be covered by something. Why should all of us pay so that people without insurance get free coverage? It's not fair. And the way to fund Obamacare, and I'll end with this, was established. One of the main ways to fund it was through a tax on medical devices. I know one young man, and I think the world of him, he's my niece's husband, who sells medical devices. He makes a fortune. The write-up, the amount of profits they make off of medical devices, selling it to the doctors who then charge 10 times as much for patients, is enormous. They had a tax established on that, which was a small percentage of it, which was enough to pay for much of Obamacare. The Republicans ended that. So all those things have added up to a disaster potentially for our healthcare system.
So this is our last, Doug, you got 30 seconds to respond to.
Right. I mean, Tim speaks like a classic liberal Democrat, where he says that these people are making big money, including his relative, on medical devices. And if you think that if you have a tax on that, they're just going to reach into their pocket and pay it and not pass it along to real people, well, I've got a bridge to sell you. You know, I can just attest that prior to Obamacare, we were in a much better place here in my business with health insurance for my employees than we were after. The price went up and the choices went down. But I will readily admit there's a lot that can be done. I'd like to see across state availability so that insurance companies could pitch nationwide instead of each state running and controlling it.
Okay, good. I got a couple quick questions here for you guys. I'll run by both of you here. And I'll go, Tim, I'll ask you first, then I'll ask Doug, because I've been asking in rotating format that way. Is there a possibility of a civil war based on the results of this election? Either way, the Trump people are saying that Trump won't leave office and the election is rigged, and the Democrats are saying that that there'll be bloodshed in the streets, or people are saying that the Democrats will do that.
The Democrat.
How do we get out of this alive.
Honestly, John, I've never been more concerned in my life over internal potential for a civil war in this country. And I don't expect it to happen, but the statements Trump has made about refusing to accept the results of the election frighten me. Honestly, they frighten me. He's been trying to basically set the tone for it by claiming that voting is fraudulent, that you can't pay attention to people's votes. I'm concerned that on election day, if Biden doesn't have an overwhelming lead, or if by some chance it's close, Trump will make an effort to exclude all votes not counted. That would be all the write-in votes that haven't been counted. A lot of towns don't count their actual prior voting until after the other votes are counted. And Trump will try to make the case that all of those votes should be discounted and should be considered fraudulent. And basically, groups like the Proud Boys and other right-wing groups he has promoted will take the streets and literally start shooting and try to take over. And will the military respond? Will they escort Trump out of the White House? I don't know. I really can't see even Donald Trump doing that, but it does have me concerned. It really does.
Doug.
I'm concerned about the future of our country with this election.
Doug, your thoughts? And we only got about a minute and a half left.
Yeah, I mean, I would contend that the Civil War is already raging on. It's going on in places like Portland and Seattle. I just saw a news report that they had some serious trouble right in Providence, Rhode Island last night. I mean, that's driving distance from my house. And, you know, it's laughable if Tim wants to make the case that the people that are doing all this chaos at the moment are somehow Republicans or Proud Boys. It's Biden people. It's Democrats. It's Antifa. As far as the election goes, I think that honestly, it's going to be a problem if it's questionable results. Now, I happen to think that Trump is going to win by an overwhelming margin. It's going to be unquestionable, and I really think he's also working towards securing a good level of popular vote so that people can put that away at the same time.
Okay, great.
So I don't think that there'll be a civil war other than the madness that's happening currently.
Okay, so I want to thank both of you guys for taking time from your busy schedules to get involved in this. The fact is, you guys are regular Americans. You go to work every day, and you know what? Tim, you got a hat that you want to wear?
I don't have a hat handy to throw on.
We want to thank you so much for taking this time. And folks, just no matter what you believe, get out and vote. And you know what? That'll be good for everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Get out and vote. And thank you, Doug. Thank you, Tim. Thank you for being civil. And we'll see you all soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Okay, very good. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.